Sarah Mitchell had always been the kind of teacher who noticed things others missed. After 15 years of working with children, she had developed an almost supernatural ability to read the subtle signs that something wasn't quite right. So when 7-year-old Emma Barnes started acting strangely during the third week of September, Sarah's instincts immediately kicked in. Emma had always been one of the quieter students in Sarah's second-grade class. She was a sweet child with bright blue eyes and golden hair that her mother always braided neatly before school. But lately something had changed. The little girl who once eagerly participated in class discussions now sat silently at her desk, picking at her fingernails until they bled. Her usual cheerful demeanor had been replaced by a haunted look that seemed far too mature for someone so young. It was during recess on a particularly crisp autumn day when Sarah first heard the words that would change everything. She had been standing near the playground equipment watching the children play, when she noticed Emma sitting alone on a bench under the old oak tree. The little girl was talking to herself, something that wasn't entirely unusual for children her age, but as Sarah moved closer, she caught fragments of the conversation that made her blood run cold. "I don't want to go home," Emma whispered to her small hands folded in her lap. "He's not my father. He's not supposed to be there." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. She knew Emma's family situation had changed recently. Just 2 months ago, Emma's mother, Linda Barnes, had married a man named Robert Crawford after a whirlwind 6-month romance. Sarah remembered the wedding photos Linda had proudly shown during the parent-teacher conference, beaming with happiness as she talked about her new husband and how excited she was to give Emma a father figure. But now, watching Emma's small frame trembling on the bench, Sarah wondered if something terrible was happening behind the closed doors of what should have been a happy new family home. Emma's academic performance had also taken a sharp decline. The bright student who had been reading above grade level was now struggling with simple worksheets. Her artwork, once filled with rainbows and smiling families, had become dark and chaotic. Just last week, she had drawn a picture that depicted a small figure hiding under a bed, while a large, menacing shadow loomed nearby. When Sarah had gently asked about the drawing, Emma had quickly crumpled it up and thrown it away, refusing to speak about it. The most concerning change, however, was Emma's relationship with her mother. Linda Barnes had always been an involved parent, volunteering for school events and maintaining regular communication with Sarah about Emma's progress. But recently, their interactions had become strained and brief. Linda seemed nervous, constantly checking her phone and cutting conversations short. The few times Sarah had seen her, she noticed that Linda looked tired and stressed. A far cry from the glowing bride she had been just weeks before. Sarah decided she needed to pay closer attention to Emma's behavior and document anything that seemed out of the ordinary. She began keeping a small notebook where she recorded Emma's moods, behaviors, and any concerning statements. What she discovered over the next few days painted an increasingly troubling picture. Emma had started asking to stay after school, inventing reasons why she couldn't go home right away. She would claim she had forgotten something in her locker or needed extra help with homework that she clearly understood perfectly well. When the school bus arrived, Sarah noticed how Emma's entire body would tense up, and she would drag her feet as she walked toward it. One afternoon, as Sarah was helping Emma with what the child claimed was difficult math homework, Emma suddenly grabbed her teacher's hand. Her small fingers were ice cold, and her blue eyes were filled with tears she was trying desperately not to shed. "Mrs. Mitchell," Emma whispered, glancing around to make sure no other students were nearby. "What do you do when someone lives in your house who isn't supposed to be there? Someone who makes your mommy cry and makes loud noises at night?" Sarah's training kicked in immediately. She knew she had to be careful not to lead Emma or put words in her mouth. But she also recognized that this might be the child's way of reaching out for help. "Emma, sweetie, can you tell me more about these loud noises? And why do you think this person isn't supposed to be in your house?" Emma's lower lip trembled. "He yells at Mommy, and he looks at me funny when she's not around. Yesterday he came into my room when I was sleeping and just stood there. When I asked him what he wanted, he said he was just checking on me." But his voice was weird and scary. The conversation was interrupted by the janitor entering the classroom, and Emma immediately clamped up, returning to her math worksheet as if nothing had happened. But Sarah had heard enough to know that she needed to take action. She also noticed something else that day, how Emma kept glancing toward the window that faced the parking lot, as if she was watching for someone. As the days passed, Sarah began to notice a pattern. Emma's behavior was always worse on certain days of the week, particularly Tuesdays and Thursdays. On these days, she would arrive at school looking like she hadn't slept, her usually neat braids messy and her clothes wrinkled. She would also be more withdrawn and jumpy, startling at sudden noises and avoiding eye contact with adults. Sarah knew she was walking a delicate line. She had a legal and moral obligation to report suspected child abuse, but she also knew that false accusations could destroy innocent families. She needed more information, but she also couldn't wait too long if Emma was truly in danger. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Sarah was staying late to grade papers when she heard a soft knock on her classroom door. She looked up to see Emma standing in the doorway, soaking wet and shivering. The child should have been home for over an hour. "Emma? Sweetie, what are you doing here? How did you get back to school?" Emma stepped into the classroom, leaving small puddles on the floor. "I walked back from the bus stop. I hid behind the big tree until all the cars left. Then I came inside through the side door that Mr. Peterson forgot to lock." Sarah immediately went to her desk drawer and pulled out the extra sweater she kept for emergencies, wrapping it around Emma's small shoulders.
"Honey, you're going to catch pneumonia."
"Why didn't you go home?" Emma's answer would haunt Sarah for weeks to come. "Because he said he would be there today. He said Mommy had to work late and it would be just him and me. I can't be alone with him, Mrs. Mitchell, I just can't." The terror in the child's voice was unmistakable, and Sarah knew that whatever was happening in the Crawford household, it was serious enough that a 7-year-old was willing to walk miles in the rain rather than face it. Sarah knew she had to handle this situation carefully. As she wrapped Emma in the warm sweater and guided her to a chair, her mind raced through her training on mandated reporting and child protection protocols. She needed to gather more information without traumatizing the child further, but she also knew that Emma's safety was the top priority. "Emma, I need you to know that you're safe here with me," Sarah said gently, pulling up a chair next to the frightened girl. "No one is going to hurt you while you're here. Can you tell me more about why you don't want to be alone with Robert?" Emma's small body was still shivering, partly from the cold rain and partly from fear. She looked around the empty classroom as if making sure they were truly alone before speaking in a voice barely above a whisper. "He touches me in ways that feel wrong," Emma said, her words coming out in a rush as if she was afraid she would lose the courage to speak if she stopped. "Not like how Mommy touches me when she hugs me or brushes my hair. Different touches that make my tummy feel sick and scared. And he tells me it's our special secret and that bad things will happen to Mommy if I tell anyone." Sarah's heart broke as she listened to Emma's revelation. She had suspected something like this, but hearing it confirmed made her feel sick with anger and protective fury. She forced herself to remain calm and supportive, knowing that Emma needed her to be strong. "Emma, you are so brave for telling me this. None of what Robert is doing is your fault and you are not in trouble. Those touches are wrong and secrets like that are not the kind of secrets you should have to keep." Emma began to cry then, not the dramatic sobs of a child who had scraped her knee, but the quiet, heartbroken tears of someone who had been carrying a terrible burden for too long. Sarah gently rubbed the little girl's back and let her cry, understanding that sometimes tears were the first step toward healing. As Emma's sobs began to subside, Sarah knew she needed to contact Child Protective Services immediately. But first, she needed to make sure Emma was safe for the rest of the day. She also needed to try to reach Linda Barnes, though she suspected that conversation would be complicated. "Emma, I need to make some phone calls to people who can help keep you safe. Would you like to sit at my desk and draw while I do that? You can use any of the special markers in my desk drawer." Emma nodded, seeming relieved to have finally shared her secret. As she settled at Sarah's desk with a piece of paper and some colorful markers, Sarah stepped into the hallway to make the necessary calls. Her first call was to Child Protective Services. She spoke with a caseworker named Janet Morrison, who had handled several cases from Sarah's school in the past. Janet took detailed notes and assured Sarah that an emergency intervention would be initiated immediately. "We'll need to interview Emma today," Janet explained, "and we'll need to ensure she has a safe place to stay until we can fully investigate the situation. Do you know anything about other family members who might be able to care for her?" Sarah thought about what she knew of Emma's family situation. "Her mother works at the bank downtown, but I'm not sure about extended family. I know her grandmother lives somewhere in the state, but I don't have contact information. We'll handle that." The important thing is that you've reported this promptly. Can you keep Emma safe until we can get someone there? Of course, Sarah replied without hesitation. Her second call was to her principal, Mrs. Henderson, who needed to be informed of the situation. Mrs. Henderson, a veteran educator with her own experience in handling child abuse cases, immediately offered her full support and assured Sarah that she had done the right thing. The third call was the most difficult. Sarah knew she needed to contact Linda Barnes, but she wasn't sure how the woman would react to the news. Linda had seemed so happy about her new marriage, and Sarah worried that she might not believe the allegations against her husband, or might blame Emma for causing trouble. Linda answered her phone on the second ring, her voice rushed and distracted. "Hello, Mrs. Mitchell, is everything okay with Emma? I'm still at work, but Robert said he would be home when she got off the bus. Linda, I need you to come to the school right away. Emma is here with me, and we need to talk about some concerns I have." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Concerns? What kind of concerns? Emma hasn't been in trouble, has she?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "No, Emma isn't in trouble, but she shared some information with me that requires immediate attention. How quickly can you get here?" I can leave work right now." "Is Emma hurt? What happened?" "Emma is physically safe right now, Linda. Please just come to my classroom as soon as you can." While they waited for Linda and the CPS caseworker to arrive, Sarah sat with Emma and tried to keep the conversation light. The little girl seemed calmer now that she had shared her secret, but Sarah could see the exhaustion in her young face. Emma had been carrying this burden for weeks, maybe months, and it had taken its toll. "Mrs. Mitchell," Emma said as she worked on her drawing, "will Mommy be mad at me for telling?" "No, sweetheart. Your mommy loves you very much and she wants you to be safe and happy. Sometimes grown-ups don't know when bad things are happening, and they need children to tell them so they can fix the problem." Emma nodded thoughtfully and continued coloring. Her drawing showed a small house with 3 stick figures, a woman, a child, and what appeared to be a dog. Notably absent was any male figure. 20 minutes later, Linda Barnes burst through the classroom door, her hair disheveled and her banker's blazer wrinkled from rushing. She immediately went to Emma and pulled her into a tight hug. "Emma, baby, are you okay?" Mrs. Mitchell said there were some concerns, but she wouldn't tell me what happened over the phone. Sarah watched Linda's face carefully as she gently explained the situation. She had learned over the years that parents' initial reactions often revealed a lot about their awareness of the abuse and their willingness to protect their children. Linda's face went through a series of emotions as Sarah spoke: confusion, denial, horror, and finally a terrible understanding. By the time Sarah finished explaining what Emma had told her, Linda was crying and holding her daughter even tighter. "Oh God, Emma, why didn't you tell me? I would have protected you. I would never have let him." Linda's voice broke as the full implications of the situation hit her. "Mommy, he said bad things would happen to you if I told," Emma said, looking up at her mother with tears in her eyes. "He said it was our secret and that you wouldn't love me anymore if you knew." Linda's expression changed from grief to fury in an instant. "Emma, listen to me very carefully. I will always love you no matter what. And Robert lied to you. Nothing that happened was your fault, and no bad things will happen to me because you told the truth." Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. Linda's reaction suggested that she had not been aware of the abuse and that she was committed to protecting her daughter. This would make the situation much easier to handle than cases where the non-abusive parent was in denial or unwilling to take action. Janet Morrison, the CPS caseworker, arrived just as Linda was reassuring Emma. Janet was a kind-faced woman in her 40s who had a gentle but professional manner that immediately put Emma at ease. She explained that she needed to interview Emma privately and that arrangements would need to be made for Emma's safety. "Mrs. Barnes, I need to ask you some difficult questions, but first, I want you to know that our primary concern is Emma's safety and well-being. Are you prepared to take immediate steps to protect your daughter?" Linda's response was swift and determined. "Yes, absolutely. Whatever needs to be done. Robert will not be allowed near Emma again." As the adults made plans for Emma's protection, the little girl continued working on her drawing, occasionally looking up to make sure her mother was still there. The ordeal was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, Emma seemed to believe that she might actually be safe. The next few hours unfolded like a carefully choreographed emergency response. Janet Morrison conducted her interview with Emma in a specially designed room at the school that was used for sensitive situations. The room was comfortable and non-threatening, with soft lighting and child-friendly furniture that helped put young victims at ease during what could be a traumatic process. While Emma spoke with the caseworker, Linda sat in Sarah's classroom, alternating between angry phone calls and tearful conversations with various officials. Sarah watched as this woman, who had seemed so confident and put together just weeks ago, struggled to process the reality that her new husband had been abusing her daughter. "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed," Linda said to Sarah during a quiet moment between phone calls. Emma had been having nightmares and she started wetting the bed again, something she hadn't done since she was 4. "I thought it was just adjustment issues from the new marriage and moving into Robert's house. How could I have been so blind?" Sarah had heard this self-blame from parents before, and she knew it was both natural and destructive. "Linda, predators are skilled at manipulation and hiding their behavior. They specifically target situations where they can create opportunities while maintaining plausible deniability. This is not your fault." But even as Sarah offered comfort, she couldn't help wondering about the warning signs that might have been there. As someone trained to recognize abuse, she knew that perpetrators often spent considerable time grooming their victims and the family situation before acting. There must have been subtle signs that Emma's behavior was more than just adjustment difficulties. Linda's phone rang again, and Sarah could hear her speaking with what sounded like a locksmith. "Yes, I need all the locks changed today." "Every single one?" "No, I don't care about the cost." "Yes, it's an emergency." When Emma emerged from her interview with Janet Morrison, she looked drained but somehow lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her small shoulders. Janet's expression was serious but kind as she approached Linda and Sarah. "Emma has been very brave and provided important information that will help us protect her," Janet said carefully. "I've documented everything according to our protocols, and the next step is ensuring her immediate safety. Mrs. Barnes, I understand you're taking steps to secure your home?" Linda nodded vigorously. "I've called a locksmith to change all the locks, and I've contacted my lawyer to begin divorce proceedings immediately. I've also called my mother in Springfield to let her know what's happening. Emma and I can stay with her if necessary." "That may be wise, at least for the short term," Janet agreed. "We'll also be coordinating with local law enforcement to ensure that appropriate charges are filed. Detective Maria Santos from the Special Victims Unit will be contacting you this evening to discuss the next steps in the criminal investigation." Sarah felt a mix of relief and sadness as she listened to these plans being made. Relief that Emma would be protected, but sadness that this innocent child would now have to navigate the complex and often difficult process of the legal system. She had seen other children go through this process, and while it was necessary for justice and protection, it was also traumatic in its own way. Emma had been sitting quietly during this adult conversation, but now she tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, what about Max?" "We can't leave Max with him." Linda looked confused for a moment. "Max? Honey, who is Max?" "My dog, Mommy. The dog that Robert said we couldn't keep because he was allergic. Max has been living in the garage, remember? Robert said if I was good and kept our secrets, Max could stay. But if I was bad, he would take Max to the pound." Sarah and Linda exchanged glances. This was the first either of them had heard about a dog, and it added another layer of manipulation to Robert's abuse. Using a beloved pet as leverage was a common tactic among abusers, creating additional emotional control over their victims. "Emma, sweetie, there's no dog at our house," Linda said gently. "Robert told me he was allergic to animals, so we couldn't have any pets." Emma's face crumpled. "But Max is real. He's brown and white and has floppy ears. He's been living in the garage, and I've been sneaking him food from my lunch. Robert said if I told anyone about our secrets, Max would disappear forever." Janet Morrison leaned forward with renewed interest. "Emma, this is very important. Can you tell me more about Max? When did you first see him?" "The day after we moved into Robert's house. I was exploring the garage and I found him hiding behind some boxes. He was really skinny and scared, but he let me pet him. When I told Robert about him, he said the dog was a stray and that I could keep him as long as I was a good girl and did what he asked." The implications of this revelation hit all three adults simultaneously. Robert had likely planted the dog in the garage specifically to use as a tool for manipulating Emma. It was a calculated and cruel tactic that showed just how predatory his behavior had been. "We need to check the garage." "Immediately," Linda said, standing up abruptly. "If there really is a dog there, we can't leave him with Robert." Janet nodded. "I'll accompany you, and we should probably have a police officer present as well. This could be important evidence of the manipulation tactics being used." Sarah looked at Emma, who was watching the adults with worried eyes. "Would you like me to come too, Emma? We can all make sure Max is safe." Emma nodded eagerly, and Sarah could see hope returning to the child's face for the first time that day. The possibility that Max was real and could be rescued seemed to give Emma something positive to focus on amid all the trauma and uncertainty. 30 minutes later, a small convoy of cars pulled up outside the house that had been Emma and Linda's home for just 2 months. Detective Santos had arrived to join the group, along with an animal control officer who had been briefed on the situation. Robert's car wasn't in the driveway, which Linda confirmed was normal for this time of day, as he usually worked late on Thursdays. Emma led the group around to the side of the house where the garage entrance was located. Linda used her key to open the door, and immediately they heard a soft whimpering from the back corner of the cluttered space. "Max," Emma called out, and a medium-sized dog with brown and white markings emerged from behind a stack of boxes. The animal was thin and clearly frightened, but his tail began wagging tentatively when he saw Emma. The animal control officer immediately began examining the dog while Detective Santos took photos of the makeshift living area that had been created in the corner of the garage. There was a dirty blanket, a water dish, and what appeared to be scraps of food scattered around the area. "This dog is malnourished and shows signs of neglect," the animal control officer reported, "but he appears to be in stable condition. He's also been microchipped, which means we can trace his origin." Within minutes, they had an answer that made the situation even more disturbing. The microchip revealed that Max belonged to an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, who lived 3 streets over. The dog had been reported missing 6 weeks ago, right around the time that Linda and Emma had moved into Robert's house. Detective Santos immediately called Mrs. Patterson, who confirmed that Max had disappeared from her fenced backyard without explanation. She had been heartbroken and had put up flyers throughout the neighborhood searching for him. "So Robert stole this dog specifically to use as a manipulation tool," Janet Morrison said grimly. "This shows a level of premeditation that makes the abuse even more serious." Emma had been reunited with Max and was gently petting him while the adults discussed the implications of their discovery. The dog seemed to remember her and was calm in her presence, which confirmed her story about having cared for him during his captivity. "Can Max come with us to Grandma's house?" Emma asked her mother. "Mrs. Patterson probably missed him, but he's been my friend during all the scary times." Linda looked at Detective Santos, who suggested they call Mrs. Patterson to discuss the situation. When they reached the elderly woman, her response was immediate and heartwarming. "That poor child has been through enough," Mrs. Patterson said over the phone. "Max has always been good with children, and if he's helped her cope with such a terrible situation, then maybe they need each other right now. I'd be happy to let her visit with him, and we can work out a more permanent arrangement later." As they prepared to leave the house with Max safely in tow, Emma looked back at the garage with a mixture of sadness and relief. "I'm glad Max doesn't have to be scared anymore," she said quietly. "And I'm glad I don't have to keep secrets anymore either." The revelation about Max had provided crucial evidence of Robert's manipulative and predatory behavior, but more importantly, it had given Emma back something precious, proof that her experiences were real and that she deserved to be believed and protected. The days following Emma's disclosure moved with the swift efficiency of a well-oiled child protection system, but also with the emotional turbulence that always accompanied such cases. Linda had taken a leave of absence from her job at the bank to focus entirely on supporting Emma and dealing with the legal proceedings that were now underway. Detective Santos proved to be exactly the kind of investigator that cases like this required: thorough, patient, and skilled at working with child victims. She had arranged for Emma to be interviewed at the county's Child Advocacy Center, a facility specifically designed to make the process less traumatic for young victims. The center looked more like a comfortable home than a government building, with soft furniture, natural lighting, and artwork that helped children feel at ease. Sarah had remained involved in Emma's case, both as the mandated reporter who had initiated the investigation and as someone whom Emma trusted. She had taken professional development courses on trauma-informed teaching practices, but nothing had quite prepared her for watching one of her students navigate the aftermath of abuse. Emma's interview at the Child Advocacy Center had gone well, according to Detective Santos. The little girl had been consistent in her account and had provided additional details that helped build the case against Robert Crawford. What made her testimony particularly compelling was her ability to describe specific incidents with the kind of detail that would be difficult for a child to fabricate. Meanwhile, Robert's reaction to the accusations had been predictably manipulative. When Detective Santos had approached him at his workplace for questioning, he had initially denied everything, claiming that Emma was a troubled child who had been acting out since the marriage. He suggested that she was jealous of his relationship with her mother and was fabricating stories to get him in trouble. However, his story began to fall apart quickly when confronted with the evidence about Max. Robert had difficulty explaining how a missing dog had ended up in his garage, especially when Mrs. Patterson identified him from a photo as someone she had seen in her neighborhood shortly before Max disappeared. Security camera footage from a nearby business showed Robert's car in the area on the day Max went missing. Linda was staying strong through the investigation, but Sarah could see the toll it was taking on her. During one of their conversations at the school, Linda revealed just how much she was second-guessing every decision she had made over the past few months. "I keep thinking about the night I introduced Emma to Robert," Linda said, sitting in Sarah's classroom after school hours. "She seemed excited about having a father figure, but now I wonder if she was just trying to make me happy. Children are so good at reading what adults want from them." Sarah remembered her own training about how abusers selected their targets. "Linda, men like Robert are skilled at identifying vulnerable situations. A single mother with a young daughter would have seemed like an ideal target. He probably spent time studying your family dynamic before he even approached you." This was proving to be true as the investigation unfolded. Detective Santos had discovered that Robert Crawford had a pattern of seeking out single mothers with young children. He had been married twice before, both times to women with daughters from previous relationships. While no formal charges had ever been filed in those cases, Detective Santos was now reaching out to those families to see if there had been unreported incidents. Emma, meanwhile, was showing remarkable resilience, though Sarah knew that healing from this kind of trauma would be a long process. The little girl had started therapy with Dr. Rachel Chen, a child psychologist who specialized in abuse cases. Dr. Chen used play therapy and art therapy techniques that allowed Emma to process her experiences in age-appropriate ways. One afternoon, Emma brought a drawing to show Sarah. It depicted a house with very high walls and a strong lock on the door. Inside the house were three figures, a woman, a child, and a dog, all smiling. Outside the walls was a dark figure that couldn't get in. "That's our new safe house," Emma explained to Sarah. "Mommy and I and Max are safe inside, and the bad man can't get to us anymore because the walls are too high and the lock is too strong." Sarah felt her heart swell with hope as she looked at the drawing. Emma was beginning to reclaim her sense of safety and control, which was crucial for her recovery. The inclusion of Max in her drawing showed how important the dog had become to her healing process. Mrs. Patterson had indeed allowed Emma to keep Max, at least temporarily. The elderly woman had been so moved by Emma's story that she had insisted the dog should stay where he was most needed. She had even helped Linda set up a proper doghouse and play area in the backyard of Linda's mother's house, where they were now living. "Max knows about secrets too," Emma had told Dr. Chen during one of their sessions. "Bad people hurt him and made him hide, just like they made me hide. But now we both get to be free and tell the truth about what happened to us." The criminal case against Robert was proceeding steadily. The district attorney had decided to file multiple charges, including child sexual abuse, kidnapping an animal, and intimidation of a victim. The evidence was strong, particularly with Emma's detailed testimony, the physical evidence from the garage, and the pattern of behavior that was emerging from Robert's past relationships. Robert's lawyer had initially suggested that he might fight the charges, but as more evidence mounted, there were indications that he might be willing to accept a plea bargain. Detective Santos explained to Linda that a plea deal would spare Emma from having to testify in court, which could be traumatic for a child her age. Sarah had been following the legal proceedings closely, both out of personal concern for Emma and professional interest in understanding how the system worked. She had learned that cases like this often took months or even years to resolve completely, and that the impact on the child and family extended far beyond the immediate crisis. One thing that struck Sarah was how differently Emma behaved, now compared to those dark weeks when she had been keeping Robert's secrets. The little girl who had once been withdrawn and fearful was beginning to show glimpses of her old personality. She participated in class discussions again, played with other children at recess, and had even volunteered to read aloud during story time. However, Sarah also noticed that Emma was hypervigilant about certain things. She always wanted to know where the exits were in any room, and she became anxious if she couldn't see her mother during school pickup time. Dr. Chen had explained that these were normal responses to trauma and that Emma would likely need ongoing support as she continued to heal. The school had also implemented additional safety measures, though they were careful not to make Emma feel singled out or different from her classmates. Sarah had worked with the administration to ensure that Emma's information was flagged in their system so that only authorized individuals could pick her up or have access to information about her. Linda had proven to be an incredibly strong advocate for her daughter throughout this process. She had educated herself about trauma recovery, attended every therapy session and legal meeting, and had even connected with other mothers who had been through similar situations. She was also seeing her own therapist to help her process the guilt and anger she felt about what had happened. The hardest part, Linda told Sarah one day, is accepting that I brought this person into our lives. Even though I know intellectually that it's not my fault, emotionally I still feel responsible for putting Emma in danger. Sarah could see that Linda was committed to doing whatever it took to help Emma heal, and to ensure that something like this never happened again. She had enrolled in a parenting class specifically designed for families dealing with trauma, and she had made it clear to Emma that she would always believe her and protect her, no matter what. As the weeks passed, Sarah began to see positive changes not just in Emma, but in her relationship with her mother. The crisis had brought them closer together in some ways, creating a bond of trust and communication that would serve them well in the future. Emma seemed to understand that her mother was on her side completely, and Linda had learned to pay attention to subtle changes in Emma's behavior and emotional state. The investigation into Robert Crawford was also revealing the extent of his manipulative behavior. Detective Santos had discovered that he had specifically targeted Linda after observing her and Emma at a local park. He had orchestrated their first meeting to seem like a coincidence, and he had spent weeks gaining their trust before moving in with them. This revelation was both disturbing and validating for Linda. It confirmed that she had been the victim of a deliberate predator, not someone who had simply made a poor judgment call about a romantic partner. Understanding the calculated nature of Robert's approach helped her begin to forgive herself and focus on moving forward with Emma. 3 months had passed since that rainy Thursday afternoon when Emma had walked back to school, rather than face going home alone with Robert Crawford. The criminal case was nearing its conclusion, with Robert having accepted a plea bargain that would send him to prison for 8 years. More importantly for Emma and Linda, the plea agreement included a permanent restraining order and mandatory registration as a sex offender, which would help protect other potential victims in the future. Sarah had watched Emma's transformation with a mixture of professional pride and personal relief. The little girl who had once whispered desperate secrets on the playground was now confidently raising her hand in class and laughing with her friends during recess. But Sarah also knew that healing from trauma was not a linear process, and she remained vigilant for signs that Emma might be struggling. Dr. Chen had explained that children often experience setbacks during their recovery, particularly around significant dates or when facing new stressors. Emma had indeed experienced a few difficult days when the local newspaper ran a story about Robert's arrest, and again when she had to give a victim impact statement that would be read at his sentencing hearing. The victim impact statement had been Dr. Chen's idea. She believed that giving Emma a voice in the legal process would help her feel empowered and provide closure. Emma had worked with Dr. Chen to write a letter that would be read by the judge during Robert's sentencing. The letter was simple but powerful, written in Emma's own words with just enough help to make it appropriate for court. "My name is Emma and I am 7 years old," the letter began. "Robert Crawford hurt me and scared me and made me keep secrets that made my tummy hurt. He also stole my friend Max and used him to make me do things I didn't want to do. I want other kids to know that if someone hurts them, they should tell a grown-up they trust even if the bad person says not to. I also want Robert to know that what he did was wrong and that he can't hurt kids anymore. Linda had been amazed by her daughter's strength in writing the statement. She had worried that participating in the legal process might re-traumatize Emma. But Dr. Chen had been right about the empowering effect of having a voice in seeking justice. Sarah had been invited to attend the sentencing hearing, both as a witness to Emma's disclosure and as someone who had played a crucial role in protecting her. The courtroom was intimidating with its formal atmosphere and serious-faced officials. But Emma seemed remarkably composed as she sat between her mother and grandmother. Judge Patricia Williams had clearly been moved by Emma's victim impact statement. In her remarks before sentencing, she spoke directly about the courage it took for a child to speak up about abuse and the importance of adults who listen and take action when children reach out for help. "Mr. Crawford," Judge Williams said, looking directly at the defendant, "you have committed crimes that have had a profound impact on a young child who trusted you. Your actions were calculated, manipulative, and designed to exploit the innocence and vulnerability of a 7-year-old girl. The court finds your behavior particularly reprehensible because of the way you used an animal to manipulate your victim and create additional emotional leverage." Robert Crawford showed no emotion during the sentencing, which somehow made his crime seem even more chilling. Sarah had studied his face during the proceedings, trying to understand how someone could appear so normal while being capable of such calculated evil. It reinforced her understanding of how predators often hide in plain sight, appearing to be ordinary members of the community. The 8-year sentence was longer than what many child abuse cases received, largely because of the kidnapping charge related to Max and the evidence of premeditation. Detective Santos had explained to Linda that Robert's methodical approach to grooming both the family and manipulating Emma had worked against him in court. After the sentencing, Emma had asked if she could see Max, who had become an unofficial therapy dog for her recovery process. Mrs. Patterson had been so touched by the bond between Emma and Max that she had officially given the dog to Emma and Linda, though she remained an active part of their extended support network. Max had indeed proven to be therapeutic for Emma in ways that even Dr. Chen hadn't fully anticipated. The dog seemed to sense when Emma was having difficult days and would stay close to her, providing comfort without being intrusive. Emma had also taken responsibility for caring for Max, which gave her a sense of purpose and control that was important for her healing. "Max understands about keeping bad secrets and good secrets," Emma had told Sarah during one of their conversations. "Bad secrets make you feel sick and scared, but good secrets are like surprise parties that make people happy. Max and I only keep good secrets now." This distinction between good and bad secrets had become an important part of Emma's therapy and her ongoing education about personal safety. Dr. Chen had worked with Emma to understand that some secrets, like surprise parties or gifts, were meant to create joy and were temporary. But secrets about touching, threats, or anything that made her feel scared or uncomfortable were never okay to keep. Sarah had incorporated this lesson into her classroom instruction as well, using age-appropriate discussions about personal safety and the difference between surprises that were fun and secrets that were harmful. She had been careful not to single out Emma during these discussions, but she could see the confidence growing in the little girl as she participated in conversations about staying safe. The school district had also implemented new training for all staff members about recognizing signs of abuse and responding appropriately when children make disclosures. Sarah had been asked to share her experience with other teachers, helping them understand the importance of trusting their instincts when something seemed wrong with a student's behavior. And one of the most rewarding aspects of Emma's recovery had been watching her relationship with her mother grow stronger. Linda had learned to communicate more openly with Emma about feelings and experiences, and Emma had learned that she could trust her mother with difficult information. They had developed rituals and routines that helped Emma feel secure, including a special bedtime routine where they would talk about the best parts of their day and anything that might be worrying Emma. Linda had also made significant changes in her own life. She had completed her divorce proceedings and had returned to work part-time, allowing her more flexibility to be available for Emma's ongoing therapy and school activities. She had also started dating again, but very cautiously and with a much better understanding of red flags and warning signs. I'll never again put my desire for companionship ahead of Emma's safety, Linda had told Sarah. Any man who wants to be part of our lives will have to earn that privilege over a long period of time, and Emma's comfort and input will always be the deciding factor. Dr. Chen had praised this approach, explaining that children who have been abused often have heightened instincts about people's intentions. Emma's ability to feel safe and comfortable with any potential future partners would be an important indicator of whether those relationships were healthy. Emma herself had expressed mixed feelings about the possibility of her mother dating again. During one therapy session, she had said, "I want Mommy to be happy, but I also want to make sure that anyone new knows that our family has rules about keeping people safe." This mature perspective impressed all the adults in Emma's life. She was clearly processing her experience in ways that would help her make better decisions about relationships and personal safety in the future. Dr. Chen had noted that children who receive proper support after trauma often develop stronger boundaries and better instincts about protecting themselves than children who have never faced such challenges. The support network that had formed around Emma and Linda had also proven to be crucial for their recovery. Mrs. Patterson had become like an honorary grandmother, often helping with childcare and providing the kind of intergenerational wisdom that enriched Emma's life. Linda's mother had moved closer to provide ongoing support, and they had connected with other families through a support group for survivors of domestic violence and child abuse. Sarah continued to check in with Emma regularly, both as her teacher and as someone who cared about her well-being. She had learned that recovery from trauma was an ongoing process that would likely continue throughout Emma's childhood and beyond, but she was optimistic about Emma's future, particularly given the strong support system that surrounded her and the remarkable resilience the little girl had already demonstrated. 6 months after Robert Crawford's sentencing, Emma's life had settled into a new normal that was healthier and safer than anything she had experienced since her mother's remarriage. The family had moved into a small house that Linda had purchased with help from her mother, creating a space that belonged entirely to them and held no memories of Robert's presence. Sarah had been invited to Emma's 8th birthday party, a joyful celebration that took place in their new backyard with a guest list that included Emma's classmates, family members, and the extended support network that had formed around them. Max wore a special birthday bandana for the occasion and seemed to enjoy the attention from the children almost as much as Emma did. What struck Sarah most about the party was how genuinely happy Emma appeared. This wasn't the forced cheerfulness that trauma survivors sometimes displayed to please the adults around them, but authentic joy and excitement. Emma laughed freely, played games with enthusiasm, and seemed completely comfortable being the center of attention on her special day. During the party, Mrs. Patterson pulled Sarah aside to share something remarkable that had happened the week before. "Emma came to visit me with Max, as she does every Tuesday," the elderly woman explained. "While she was there, a little girl from down the street came by with her mother. The girl seemed very shy and withdrawn, and when her mother mentioned that they were having some family troubles, Emma immediately went over to talk to her." Mrs. Patterson's eyes sparkled as she continued the story. "Emma told this little girl that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and that children should never have to keep secrets that make them feel scared or sick. She said it so matter-of-factly with such wisdom. The girl's mother was amazed, and it turned out she had been worried about her daughter's behavior lately. They ended up having a very important conversation that day." Sarah felt a surge of pride hearing this story. It demonstrated that Emma was not only healing from her own trauma, but was also developing the kind of empathy and strength that could help other children in similar situations. This was one of the most positive outcomes that could emerge from such a difficult experience. Dr. Chen had been gradually reducing the frequency of Emma's therapy sessions as the little girl continued to make progress. They now met every other week instead of weekly, and the focus had shifted from processing trauma to building resilience and developing healthy coping strategies for normal childhood challenges. "Emma has done remarkable work in therapy," Dr. Chen told Linda during one of their regular check-ins. "She's developed excellent communication skills and has a very healthy understanding of boundaries and personal safety." While she may need occasional support as she grows and faces new developmental challenges, she's built a strong foundation for emotional health. This progress was evident in Emma's academic performance as well. Her grades had returned to their previous high levels, and she had even joined the school's reading club, where she often chose books about brave characters who overcame difficult challenges. Sarah had noticed that Emma particularly enjoyed stories where animals played important roles, undoubtedly influenced by her bond with Max. Linda had also continued to thrive in her new life. She had been promoted to assistant manager at the bank and had started taking evening classes toward a degree in social work. Her experience with Emma's case had inspired her to want to help other families navigate similar crises. "I want to work with Child Protective Services eventually," Linda told Sarah during a parent-teacher conference. "I understand now how crucial it is to have people in the system who really understand what families are going through. I want to be able to help other mothers learn to trust their instincts and protect their children." The legal aftermath of Robert's case had also created some positive changes in the community. Detective Santos had used the case as an example in training sessions for other law enforcement officers, highlighting the importance of taking children's reports seriously and understanding the sophisticated manipulation tactics that predators often use. The school district had implemented new policies based on lessons learned from Emma's case. All staff members now received annual training on recognizing signs of abuse, and there were clearer protocols for reporting and responding to disclosures. Sarah had been asked to serve on a committee that was developing these new procedures. Emma herself had become something of a quiet advocate for child safety. While she was careful not to overshare personal details about her experience, she had spoken to Dr. Chen's other young patients about the importance of telling trusted adults when something was wrong. Her natural leadership skills and genuine caring had made her an effective peer supporter. One particularly meaningful development had been Emma's relationship with other children who had experienced trauma. Through Dr. Chen's practice, she had met several other young survivors, and they had formed a small support group that met monthly for activities and informal peer counseling. These relationships had helped Emma understand that she wasn't alone in her experience and that healing was possible. Max continued to be an important part of Emma's healing journey, but his role had evolved as Emma had grown stronger. Initially, he had served primarily as a comfort animal, providing emotional support during difficult moments. Now he was more of a companion and friend, joining Emma on adventures and providing the kind of unconditional love that only a dog can offer. Mrs. Patterson had become fascinated by the therapeutic impact that Max had on Emma and had started volunteering with a local organization that trained therapy animals. She often joked that Max had taught her as much about resilience and recovery as any of the books she had read on the subject. The anniversary of Emma's disclosure had passed quietly, marked only by a special dinner that Linda had prepared to celebrate Emma's courage in speaking up. Rather than dwelling on the difficult memories associated with that time, they had chosen to focus on how far they had come and the bright future that lay ahead. Emma had asked if she could plant a tree in their new backyard to commemorate what she called the day I got brave enough to tell the truth. They had chosen a young oak tree, which Dr. Chen had suggested was symbolically appropriate because oak trees were known for their strength and longevity. Emma had decorated the area around the tree with colorful stones, creating a small garden that she tended with great care. Sarah visited Emma's tree garden during the birthday party and was moved to see a small plaque that Linda had placed there. It read simply, "Emma's Courage Tree, planted in honor of speaking truth and choosing safety." The tree was thriving, its young leaves bright green and healthy, much like Emma herself. As the birthday party wound down and guests began to leave, Emma approached Sarah with a handmade card. Inside, she had written, "Thank you for believing me and helping me be safe. You are one of my favorite grown-ups because you listen to kids and you care about keeping us safe." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes as she read Emma's words. This was exactly why she had become a teacher in the first place, to make a difference in children's lives and to be the kind of adult that children could trust with their most important concerns. The card also included a drawing that showed Sarah, Emma, Linda, Max, and Mrs. Patterson all standing together under a rainbow. At the bottom, Emma had written, "My safe grown-ups who helped me tell the truth." As Sarah drove home from the party that evening, she reflected on how Emma's case had changed her own perspective on teaching and child protection. She had always been observant and caring, but now she understood even more deeply the critical role that teachers could play in identifying and responding to abuse. She had also learned that healing was possible, even from the most traumatic experiences. When children received proper support and protection, Emma's story had reminded Sarah that sometimes the bravest thing a child could do was whisper a secret to a trusted adult, and that sometimes the most important thing an adult could do was simply listen and believe. The combination of Emma's courage, Linda's fierce protectiveness, and the community's commitment to child safety had created an outcome that, while born from tragedy, had ultimately led to healing, justice, and hope. 2 years had passed since that pivotal day when Emma first whispered her fears to Sarah Mitchell, and the transformation in everyone involved was remarkable. Emma, now 9 years old, had grown into a confident, articulate child who carried herself with the quiet strength that often comes from having survived difficult circumstances and emerged stronger. Sarah had kept in touch with Emma even after she moved up to 3rd grade with a different teacher. Their bond had evolved from teacher-student to something more like mentor and mentee, with Sarah serving as one of several trusted adults in Emma's expanded support network. Emma would often stop by Sarah's classroom after school to share stories about her day, or to show off a particularly good test score or art project. On this particular afternoon in early spring, Emma appeared in Sarah's doorway with Max trotting beside her. The school had made special accommodations to allow Max to visit occasionally, recognizing his therapeutic value and the positive impact he had on other students as well as Emma. "Mrs. Mitchell, I have something important to tell you," Emma announced, with the serious expression she wore when discussing matters of significance. Sarah immediately gave Emma her full attention, having learned never to dismiss anything the little girl considered important. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" Emma settled into the chair beside Sarah's desk, with Max lying down at her feet. "You know how I've been helping Dr. Chen talk to other kids who have had scary things happen to them?" Sarah nodded. Emma had been participating in peer support activities for several months, sharing her experience with other young trauma survivors under Dr. Chen's careful supervision. "Well, yesterday I met a little boy named Tyler who is 6 years old. He was really scared and didn't want to talk to any of the grown-ups, but he started talking to me when he saw Max. Tyler told me that his babysitter has been doing bad things to him and making him keep secrets, just like what happened to me." Emma's voice remained steady as she shared this information, showing the emotional maturity she had developed through her own healing process. "I told Tyler the same thing you told me, that kids should never have to keep secrets that make them feel scared or sick, and that there are good grown-ups who will believe them and help them be safe." Sarah felt a familiar mixture of sadness and pride as she listened to Emma's account. Sadness that another child was experiencing abuse, but pride in seeing how Emma was using her experience to help others. It was a powerful example of post-traumatic growth where individuals not only recover from trauma, but actually develop new strengths and capabilities as a result of their experience. "What happened after you talked to Tyler?" Sarah asked. "He told Dr. Chen what was happening and she called the police and his parents. Tyler's mom cried a lot, but she hugged him and told him he was brave for telling the truth. Dr. Chen said that Tyler's parents are going to make sure he's safe now." Emma paused, her expression thoughtful. "You know what's funny, Mrs. Mitchell? I used to think that what happened to me was the worst thing ever, and I wished it had never happened. But now I think maybe it happened so I could help other kids like Tyler."
Maybe bad things sometimes happen for reasons we don't understand until later. This level of insight from a 9-year-old was extraordinary, though Sarah had come to expect remarkable wisdom from Emma. The little girl had processed her trauma
in ways that allowed her to find meaning and purpose in her experience, which was one of the most positive outcomes possible for a survivor. "I think you're very wise, Emma, and I think Tyler is lucky to have someone like you who understands what he's going through." Emma brightened at this praise. "Dr. Chen says I might want to be a therapist or a police officer when I grow up, so I can keep helping kids be safe. Or maybe I'll be a teacher like you so I can watch out for kids who seem scared or sad." The conversation was interrupted by Linda arriving to pick up Emma. Linda looked tired but content as she entered the classroom, her evening social work classes having just ended. She had successfully completed her degree program and had recently been hired by the county's Child Protective Services Department. "Hi, Mrs. Mitchell." I hope Emma hasn't been talking your ear off, Linda said with a smile. Never, Sarah replied warmly. Emma was just telling me about her work with Dr. Chen and how she's helping other children. Linda's expression grew serious. Yes, she told me about Tyler yesterday. I'm so proud of how she's using her experience to help others. But I also worry, sometimes, about whether it's too much responsibility for someone her age. This was a valid concern that Dr. Chen had addressed carefully. Emma's involvement in peer support was strictly limited and carefully supervised to ensure that it remained therapeutic for her, rather than becoming a burden. The key was maintaining appropriate boundaries and ensuring that Emma continued to focus on her own development and normal childhood activities. Dr. Chen says I'm not responsible for fixing other kids' problems, Emma interjected, clearly having absorbed this important distinction. I just share my story and let them know they're not alone. The grown-ups are the ones who have to fix the problems. Sarah was impressed by Emma's understanding of appropriate boundaries. This was often a challenging concept for adult survivors of trauma to master, let alone a child. It spoke to the quality of therapy Emma had received and her own natural emotional intelligence. As they prepared to leave, Emma mentioned something that caught Sarah's attention. Oh, Mrs. Mitchell, I forgot to tell you. Mom has a new friend named David who she's been seeing for a few months. He's really nice, and he always asks me if I'm comfortable with things before he plans anything with our family. Linda blushed slightly at her daughter's announcement. Emma likes to share all our family news, she said with mild embarrassment. But Sarah was pleased to hear about this development. Linda had been cautious about dating, understandably so given their experience with Robert. The fact that she was now comfortable enough to introduce someone to Emma, and that Emma felt safe with this new person, suggested that Linda had successfully applied the lessons she had learned about recognizing healthy versus unhealthy relationship dynamics. David works with animals at the Wildlife Rescue Center, Emma continued excitedly. He's been teaching me about different animals and how to help them when they're hurt or scared. He says animals and kids are similar because they both need adults to protect them and keep them safe. This perspective from David showed wisdom and sensitivity, suggesting that he understood Emma's history and was approaching their relationship with appropriate care and awareness. The fact that he worked with vulnerable animals also spoke well of his character and his ability to be gentle with those who needed protection. As Emma and Linda prepared to leave with Max, Emma turned back to Sarah one more time. Mrs. Mitchell, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetie. Do you think about me when you look at other kids in your class? Like, do you watch them to see if they might need help like I did? Sarah considered this question carefully. I think about you often, Emma, and you've taught me to be even more observant about all my students. Your courage in speaking up has helped me become a better teacher and a better protector of children. Emma smiled at this response. Good. Because every kid deserves to have a grown-up like you who pays attention and cares about keeping them safe. As they walked toward the parking lot, Sarah watched Emma skipping alongside her mother and Max, looking every bit like a normal, happy 9-year-old. The trauma she had experienced would always be part of her story, but it no longer defined her daily life or limited her potential for the future. Later that evening, Sarah received a call from Detective Santos, who had remained in touch with Emma's family and had become something of a mentor to Sarah in understanding the long-term implications of child abuse cases. I heard from Dr. Chen about the Tyler case that Emma helped with, Detective Santos said. I wanted you to know that the investigation is moving quickly, and it looks like we'll be able to protect that little boy and possibly prevent other children from being victimized by the same perpetrator. She paused before continuing. You know, Sarah, cases like Emma's create ripple effects that extend far beyond the immediate victim. Emma's courage in speaking up not only saved herself, but has now potentially saved other children too. That's the power of breaking the silence around abuse. As Sarah hung up the phone, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a little girl's whispered confession on a playground bench. Emma's story had started with fear, secrets, and manipulation, but it had evolved into a testament to the power of courage, truth, and the protective love of a community committed to child safety. The little girl who had once whispered, "He's not my father," in fear and confusion, had grown into a young person who spoke confidently about safety, boundaries, and the importance of trusted adults. Max, the dog who had been used as a tool of manipulation, had become a symbol of healing and hope. And the adults who had rallied around Emma had learned valuable lessons about vigilance, belief, and the crucial importance of listening when children find the courage to speak their truth. Emma's story would continue to unfold as she grew into adolescence and adulthood, but the foundation of strength, safety, and support that had been built around her would serve her well throughout her life. Most importantly, her experience had shown that even the most traumatic circumstances could be overcome when children received proper protection, support, and love from the adults in their lives.